my thesis turned out to be a little bit of a feminist manifesto. It is mainly about the underrepresentation of female anatomy in medical textbooks and the medical curriculum in general. I studied this mostly on the basis of endometriosis, which is a estrogen-dependent disease of the inner lining of the uterus that will land somewhere else in the abdomen and cause a lot of pain there. It's a greatly understudied disease, and this is how I linked it to the underrepresentation of female knowledge in the medical world, basically. On my thesis, I was advised by Nicole Donnellan. She is a obstetrics and gynecologist in the Mickey Women's Research Center and Institute and Foundation in Pittsburgh in the US. And she is specialized in endometriosis and currently worked together with many specialists at this institute to create an interdisciplinary care center where scientific communication is necessary and where I wanted to help. Most of the illustrations that I made will be used by professionals to educate the patients, to explain what is going on in their body and what will the next steps will be that can be taken on treatment and such things. It's also targeted at money donors, so basically to convince people how important the research on this subject is and to get their support. The biggest part of my research is focused on the underrepresentation of female anatomy in medical textbooks and medical education. I noticed a lot of books don't show as much of the female anatomy as of the male anatomy, leave out important things, especially when it's about reproductive anatomy and the clitoris. I also noticed that things like the models that we use for teaching students, not only here but also in medical environments, school environments, are still heavily based on male anatomy, which has a long history and is understandable to a degree, but I think there's change needed. I also think that we've come to a point where we now know that that it's not even representation, and maybe we should stop researching if there's an issue and start helping the issue. So that's what I also wanted to do with my thesis, to see how we can get some more female anatomy in the basic knowledge of everybody, really. So to collect the data that I made the illustrations with, first of all, I was provided by many research papers by my external advisor, Nicole, which I tried to read, but were also very complicated, so she helped me with this as well. Lots of the anatomy I learned from anatomical atlases that already exist, but here I also noticed that especially the subjects that I was interested in are so underrepresented or unknown to some extent that it wasn't very well documented yet. And therefore I really wanted to go and see cadavers and look at dissections, which I did, but was also difficult because, for example, the pelvic floor is very difficult to dissect, so it hasn't been done very often. So this also didn't leave me with very good references. So in the end, it's a combination, I think, of the textbooks, of cadaver studies, of medical journal papers, and 3D models that people have created from scans, for example, of cadavers. And I combined that and got feedback from a lot of different experts and made some illustrations. As for techniques, I mainly used a technique where you scan a graphite pencil drawing and color it digitally in Photoshop. I decided to do this because it was a fairly new technique to me, so I wanted to try it and master it. But only because it's a pretty efficient method compared to, for example, watercolor, where you have to prepare paper and it's not as well, movable as well. You'd have to take the gigantic watercolor board with you everywhere you go. This allowed me to work more remotely. And compared to colored pencil, for example, it's much faster. And I think that would be my main reason. I wanted to keep the traditional feel in it as well. So I didn't want to start from Photoshop or a digital method from the start. I think I learned from my thesis, or from the subject that my thesis had, that I feel that we have a large responsibility as scientific illustrators, because we are the bridge that communicates between science and society, and we decide how that is communicated together with your client, of course. But the decisions that you make have an impact on how the society perceives that information, and I think it's good to be aware of that and take that into consideration, especially when we're talking about representing minorities, things like that. I hope that people reading my thesis will notice that they don't know as much about the female anatomy as that they probably know the male anatomy in most cases. And I hope that they will learn a little bit about themselves or the people with the uterus around them. I hope that they see that this is not an issue of the individual, but an issue of our whole society, and that we need to work together to teach people more about this. And I hope they also go to their gynecologist regularly, because it's very important. People don't do that enough. I liked most about the project that you get to experience you get to talk to lots of different specialists in different areas and see a little bit about how they work. I like that you can dive so deep into one subject for so long. Instead of only having a few weeks, you have a few months. And I like that it's something that I feel very passionate about. And I really, really enjoyed cutting into the cadaver, which sounds creepy, but was very cool. Especially the fresh frozen one. And because the colors are very vibrant and much closer to how real live humans would look, compared to the ones that have been in the formaldehyde for a very long time and are more beige and discolored. And I was allowed to try and find the clitoris, which is actually pretty hard.